programming concept. Okay. So today we cover Unit 10, Unit 11 and Unit 12 also. Okay, so from this advanced C programming concepts, what are the objectives? So objectives basically are understand the role of the C preprocessor in program compilations and apply preprocessor operators. Okay, and they apply storage class to control visibility and persistence and detect and analyze runtime and logical errors. So first thing is functions. Okay, so basically function is a self-contained block of code that performs a specific task, and it helps in modular programming, code reusability and easier debugging. Okay, so these are the syntax, that is how to declare functions. Okay, so C functions can be classified into two categories. First one is library functions and second one is user defined functions. So in library functions predefined in the standard library of C. Okay, and user defined function, it has to be developed by the user at the time of program writing. And the next slide is declaration of a function. Slide number 5. Okay, so how to declare functions? Declaration tells the compiler about the function name, return type and parameters before its actual use. So here is one example that how to add this integer value. Basically this tells the compiler there is a functions names add, and it takes two integers and it returns an integer value. Okay, the actual functions definition may come later. Okay, after first now what is function prototype? A function prototype is a declaration that specifies the functions, argument types and return type, and enabling type checking by compiler. Okay, so here one example. Okay, so here these are this area are the function name. Okay, now calling a function. Okay, to call a function, you simply needs to pass the required parameters along with the function name, and if the function returns a value, then you can store the returned value. Okay, so first this line tells the compiler that a function named max exists, and the function will take two integer value as input, and it will return an integer value. Okay, so these are the example that how to call a functions. After that, while calling a functions, there are two ways in which arguments can be passed to a functions. So there is called a call by value and call by reference. Okay, there are two types of functions. In call by value, this method copies the actual value of an argument into the formal parameter of the function, and in this case changes made to the parameter inside the function have no effect on the argument. Okay, and in call by reference, this method copies the address of an argument into the formal parameter, and inside the function the address is used to access the actual argument used in the call. This means that changes made to the parameter affect the argument. Okay? Now the slide number 8, that is the return statement. The return statement sends a value back to the calling functions and terminate function execution. So this is the example that return sum. Okay, that basically what? Basically sends the value. Ma'am, can you please share the slide?
It's sharing.
Okay. Slide number 9. That is variables and storage classes. Okay. So there are types of variables in C programming. First one is local variable and global variables, and automatic variables, static variables, and external variables. Okay, so in local variable basically declared inside a functions or block. Okay, and accessing only within that functions, and lifetime is limited to the executions of the functions. And in global variables that declares outside all the functions and accessible to all the function in the program and exist for the entire duration of the program. And automatic variables, that is default storage class for local variables and created when a function is called and destroyed when it exists. And in static variables that retain their value between the function calls and can be local or global. And lifetime is the entire program executions. And the external variable, global variables declared using the extern keyword and used to share variables across the multiple source file. And the next slide, I think the storage class. So in the storage class, there are 4 different storage classes specified in C. First one is automatic, then external, static, and register. So the storage class associated with a variable can sometimes be established by the location of the variable's declaration within the program or by prefixing keywords to variable's declaration. Okay. Now, the next slide, that is the types of slide number 11. Okay, so in the slide number 11, there are the types of the functions, that is the with no arguments and with no return values, and the second one is with no arguments and with return value, and with arguments and with no return value, and the fourth one is the arguments and with return value. Okay, now after that, preprocessor. Okay, preprocessor and macros. The slide number 12. Basically, the C preprocessor is a program that processes source code before compilation, and it handles directives that start with and it does not take substitution and file inclusion and conditional compilations. And preprocessor directives are not terminated with semicolon, and executes instructions like define, hash include. Okay, these are before the write the before the compiler, and basically helps in code reuse and program customization and platform dependent programming. Okay, now has defined to implement constant. That basically the has defined directive is used to define symbolic constants that are replaced by the preprocessor before compilations. Okay, so there are some advantages like no memory allocation and faster execution and easy to modify values. So these are the has defined implementation constants. After the has defined, that basically to create functional macros. In the next slide, slide number 14, that macros can also take arguments that is similar to functions. Okay, and that difference from the function, there is no type checking, and that is basically faster. That means no function call overhead. Now slide number 15, the preprocessor operators. In preprocessor operators basically help manipulate macro arguments. Okay, that is first one is a macro continuation operator that is used to write macros in multiple tasks. Okay, and then second is token operator that is basically join two tokens into one. Okay, so the next slide is 16, that is reading from other files using hash include, that is used to include header file. Okay, there is a system header and user defined header, and other preprocessor commands are there is the other preprocessor commands. Okay, the pragma, error, line, and the purpose of this pragma is compiler specific instructions, and the error hash error for generates compile time error, and hash line that basically changes line number for error messages. Now, error handling and debugging techniques. In error handling and debugging are essentials to detect, analyze, and fix errors in a program to ensure correctness, reliability, and maintainability. Basically, error handling using return values. So many C functions return values to indicate success or failures. Okay, so 0 means what? Success, and non-zero, that is -1, means that is error. After that, slide number 19, that is error handling using assert. This function is basically used to check assumptions during program execution. Okay, and terminates program if condition is false. Okay, now in slide number 20, that is debugging tools and techniques. In debugging tools, the process of identifying and fixing errors in a program. Okay, so the printf, that is the simplest debugging technique. Ma'am, can you please share the slide?
It's sharing, ma'am.
Okay, so there are many commands. Okay, debug command, that is break main, run, next, step, print text, continue. with these are the commands, and there is a there is a purpose of this command. Okay, so students, please go through these units. Okay, and there is some self-assessment questions based on this topic. So there are 7 questions. You must go through the unit 3 from 3 units. Okay, so the next class contains from, that is the unit 13 and 14 from block 4, that is data algorithms in C.